For player profiles, in-depth features and exclusive interviews, visit sfhandbook.com to learn more about the best young football players in the world. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Scouted Football Podcast. We're fast approaching our 100th episode and I'm very keen for it to be a special edition. So if you have a particular guest or topic you'd like to hear discussed, a team whose youth recruitment or current under-23 crop assessed, do please get in touch with us at Scouted or by contacting me personally. That would be Joe Donoghue on Twitter. I'd be really curious to hear your suggestions. And also, please remember to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Podfollow, wherever you get your podcasts, because it helps us reach more people and each rating is greatly appreciated. On to today's episode then, and it's a very timely one, if I may say so myself. Portugal were condemned to the World Cup playoffs earlier this month, defeated in the last minute by Serbia and Aleksandar Mitrovic, who leapfrogged them into the only automatic qualification place for Qatar 2022. That has unleashed a tide of reactionary takes, opinions from distinguished pundits, ex-pros and just your average punter as well, about sort of where it all went wrong. But with me today, I'm sure to reassure everybody in the long run that all is not lost, is Aaron Barton of Próxima Jornada, the leading resource on Portuguese football in the English language. Aaron, how are we doing?
Fantastic, mate. Absolutely delighted to be here, and hopefully we can dig into Portugal and what seems to be going wrong at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you sound like you're doing a lot better than the Portuguese national team, put it that way. But yeah, I mean, what got you into sort of following Portuguese football in the first place?
So it's a question I've been asked a lot of times, to be honest. It basically, when I was about maybe 6 or 7, round about that age, I remember watching Portugal for the first time on TV, and I think Euro 2004, around that time. And obviously this coincided a couple of months previous in May with Jose Mourinho's Porto side, who obviously won the Champions League against Monaco in the final. So a lot of those players were also playing for the national team, you know, the likes of Ricardo Carvalho, Deco, those type of players. And as a kid, I was just infatuated by this team, and it was something that never really left. And then obviously Portugal then qualified for the 2006 World Cup. So at this point, 2 years older, obviously played England again twice in 2 tournaments. And it was one of those things I always thought as I got older, maybe as a child, you have these infatuations, or you have these things that you're really into, and then it sort of fades away. But with Portuguese football, it never did. It never did. And the older I got, the more into it I got, because obviously with the advancements of technology and the internet, it was easier to then watch matches from abroad and get more up-to-date information. So I started following the club side of things, Primeira Liga, Segunda Liga, Campeonato de Portugal, the cup competitions. Obviously the national team was my main love. And then when I got to about 18, I started going over to Portugal to watch games, just club games. If I was ever in the country, I'd always try and catch a match. And then, a couple of years ago, I decided to start writing about it, not knowing whether I'd be able to, sort of garner an audience or not. But it was just, I felt like there was a gap for good quality journalism on Portuguese football. And I thought I'm going to do, my best to try and fill it. And people responded to it. People are into it. People who never really took an interest in Portuguese football found that they had this sort of resource to go to, and there's other great ones out there as well. So it all pushes towards highlighting the good in Portuguese football and players, clubs, all the good stories that come out of the country, who has such a fascinating story. To be honest, I think Portugal and football is such a great relationship, and that's where I am today. So it all started basically out of love.
Yeah, I remember those early sort of 2000s Euros tournaments. It felt like England couldn't shake off Portugal and Ricardo and penalty shootouts and and just the heartache that came with those shootouts and the defeats. But no, I suppose you looking from the other side of it, you probably weren't too despondent about that. But yeah, I think that's really cool. Like, you know, getting over to go and see games. I think that's one of the best things about following a different country's footballing heritage, or following a different team for a different country, is that, you know, you get those experiences that perhaps you know, your average football fan just doesn't get. So yeah, I got a lot of time for that. But you know, on to sort of Portugal in the present day, in 2021 going into 2022, and I think one of the things that really stood out to me when I was sort of doing, you know, the background for this, and I suppose this didn't really require an awful lot of background, because, you know, I think it's common knowledge, but three of Portugal's most capped players ever are in the current squad. You know, you've got 36-year-old Ronaldo, João Moutinho, 37, 38-year-old Pepe as well. You know, they're still very much in and around the national team setup. They're playing for a manager in Fernando Santos, who is, you know, approaching 100 games in charge. I think he's at 95 or 96 at the moment, which is the most of any permanent Portugal manager in the country's history. So, you know, we're really approaching a time of potential transition, I think it's fair to say, given, you know, the life cycle of football managers, and also the life cycle of international players' careers. You know, I mean, the Euros defense in the summer was pretty subpar. I think it's fair to say. Obviously, got through the groups, but were knocked out in the round of 16. What's sort of the general mood, the general consensus around Portuguese football at the moment?
I think the general mood, well, it's a lot worse now than it was, say, a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, the result against Serbia was catastrophic in terms of Portugal potentially not even making the World Cup with one of the best generations in the nation's history. It would be, it'd be a farce. It'd be ridiculous if they weren't able to get there. Now, before that, there was this sort of maybe dividing line between people who were still Fernando Santos in and the people who wanted them out. As you say, he's racked up the numbers. It's some of the squad are aging. He's been there for a while. There's this transition period, and people have been maybe trying to hint at it for the last couple of years, but it hasn't really came. There was a section of the fans who wanted them gone after the 2018 World Cup. So you think back, that was 3 years ago. In that time, Portugal obviously had 2 years before that the Euro 2016 triumph, then the Nations League triumph, which was the inaugural version of the competition. It was hosted in Portugal, and obviously Portugal managed to win that. Has that sort of maybe given him a bit more time, possibly? And then there's the section of the fans who remained loyal to him, should I say. But I feel like there was a big switch after the Serbia game. I feel like those who were reluctant to turn on Portugal's best ever and most successful manager ever, which Fernando Santos is, when we look at Portugal on paper, how many tournaments Portugal failed to qualify for over the years. I'm talking going back, to the very start. Now, in his time at Portugal, he's managed to win, you can call it 2 major honours if you class Nations League, and then if not, he's still managed to win Portugal the European Championship, their first ever major international tournament trophy. So there's that element of it, but I feel like after the Serbia game, as I say, a lot of fans started to maybe think, is it time for him to go? Is his time up, basically? And if we think about it on a club football level, the defence, the 2018 World Cup, and then the Euro defence, and then how these playoffs have gone, he'd be gone. But obviously in international management, it's a little bit more sympathetic. It's a little bit more sentimental. And the fact that he has delivered Portugal's trophies only sort of gives him more credibility. And the nation of Portugal and myself and those who follow Portuguese football from outside of the country will be forever grateful for what Fernando Santos has done. But he recently spoke out he did an interview for Portuguese TV, a live interview. It was a couple of days after the Serbia game, And some people were actually thinking, is he going to resign? Is this where he's going to step down? And he says, I will leave. I will quit as head coach of Portugal if we fail to make the World Cup. Which, to be honest, only frustrated people because it's this sort of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because if we fail to make the World Cup, that's a disaster, and only then he'll be gone. But then on the flip side, well, if Portugal do make the World Cup, people are going to be frustrated that he's still in charge at the World Cup. Sort of the expectation to really go far. Fernando Santos in the interview said he doesn't think that the defence has been that bad, and they've actually played quite well. So, yeah, I think it's just frustration at the moment because Portugal have this enormous amount of talent in so many different positions. And we're not just talking talent, we're talking world-class players. We're talking the likes of João Cancelo, who's, well, he's one of the best left-backs and right-backs in world football. Bernardo Silva, at the moment, for my money, is the best midfielder in the world. But he's certainly playing like it. He's back to his 2018-19 form for Man City, which is just brilliant. Then, the likes of Bruno Fernandes, he didn't even start, coming off the bench. Who what he gives you, and then obviously we've got the big names, Ruben Dias, Cristiano Ronaldo, those type of players. But there's so much quality in that team. To not go to a World Cup would be, would be the worst kind of heartbreak, I think, for Portuguese football supporters.
Yeah, it'd be catastrophic, wouldn't it? Because I think people looked at the European teams who've dropped into the playoffs, and you've got Portugal and Italy, who are the considerable outliers. You've got the 2016 Euros winners, and then you've also got the 2020 Euros winners, who are both in danger of not qualifying for the World Cup. And there's 12 teams in that process, in that playoff avenue. And only 3 will get through. So, if Portugal and Italy get drawn in the same path, there is a certainty that one of them will not end up qualifying. So that is the risk that ultimately, you let yourself in for when you don't dominate your group like other, nations of Portugal's squad quality have done. With Fernando Santos, it's one which from the outside, it does seem as though there needs to be sort of a clean break, but then do you also make sure that the clean break, as you said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. The clean break, does that come at the expense of qualifying for a major tournament? Well, is that necessarily the most prudent thing to do? Probably not. Sometimes people just want you to step away amicably and honourably, going out on top, but it never goes that way, does it?
No.
And I think in terms of the squad, you mentioned there at the end, Cristiano Ronaldo, inarguably one of the best players of all time, but at 36 and with the sort of the talent coming through, potentially creating a bottleneck for other players because you can't not have Ronaldo in the team, sort of thing. So that in itself creates issues from sort of my perspective. But what are your thoughts on the reasons for not qualifying? Is there an element of Ronaldo maybe not fitting into a system, or is that something which potentially in future could be an issue for any manager coming in?
To be honest, I think it's more tactically. Obviously we can't put all the blame on the manager because the players are out there who are being asked to do a certain job and they're not doing it to the best of their capability. But at the same time, I do think tactically Portugal just look a little bit lost at times. I think in that Serbia game, you wasn't too sure of what Portugal were even trying to do because obviously you get the goal, you go ahead early, and then it feels like for the entire game you're defending. Yeah, he was asking players like João Moutinho, he was calling them over to the side, get on the ball and let's bring us up the pitch. But João Moutinho was nowhere to be found. It all just, the system, it just didn't look. It's hard to really describe. It's just not coherent. It's a little bit all over the place. Portugal decide to go, when they do try and push up the pitch, they leave themselves exposed, trying to put players into positions that they don't necessarily fit into. As you say, sometimes when he didn't play it in the Serbia game, but playing Ronaldo and Andre Silva together, it just looks a little bit clunky because obviously Cristiano is starting out wide, but him and Andre Silva want to occupy the same spaces. They both want to be in the box. They both want to. I mean, Andre Silva's this sort of archetypal number 9, this striker who wants to get his head on things, wants to be in the 6-yard box. Right. Well, so does Cristiano when a cross is coming into the box. So they create that sort of dynamic, and then you've got someone like Bernardo Silva who quite clearly plays his best football when he's playing in midfield, when he plays as that sort of number 8 on the right side of maybe of a 4-3-3 like he does for Man City, and he has a natural winger in front of him. Instead, for Portugal, he's sort of running the wing as an out-and-out winger, which for a player of his calibre who wants to sort of come inside and knit nice moves together, he isn't a player who can just rely on pace and get to the byline and like a traditional, shall we say, winger. So again, that's an issue. Defensively, Portugal haven't looked great. Then you look at what happened, the second yellow card for Pep in the first game, he's then suspended for the Serbia game. Now, for as great as Ruben Dias is, which he is, he's fantastic. He's the future of central defence for Portugal. The fact that Portugal still rely on Pepe as well to be in alongside him at the age of 38, going on 39, again is a major issue for all the talent that's coming through. Fernando Santos hasn't really tried to bring one of the other lads through, maybe because they haven't been performing as well as they should. But again, that's another argument for another day. I just think Portugal have just become a little bit predictable. I think they suffer when they play against certain type of teams. So if you look at how Portugal play when they come up against a side who use a back 3 or a back 5, for an example, they really suffer. They really find it difficult to break it down. The fullbacks of Portugal, are they being asked to press on the opposition wingbacks and force them back, or then sometimes they stand off and Portugal are overloaded? You look at the game against Ireland, the 0-0. Ireland with a better side in that game, and again playing against a back 3, or a back 5, however we want to take it. The first game against Ireland, Portugal were rescued by Ronaldo, if you remember, in the last couple of minutes. They were 1-0 down for the majority of the game, and he scores in the 89th, and then the 96th or 97th minute, I think it was. Then go back a little bit further than that, the Euros, Belgium, you could say Portugal actually, they played well and they should have went through, but the fact is they didn't. They lost 1-0, and again, it was a side employing, a similar shape. The game against Germany, again, absolutely battered 4-2. It could have been so much more for Portugal. They found it so hard to deal with Robin Gosens and Joshua Kimmich on the other side. The spaces in between, it's like Portugal didn't know what to do. So not to, and it's just quite a long, convoluted, long-winded answer, but I feel like there's so many different issues. I feel like people do try and put it all just on the fact that Cristiano is starting, but until he steps away, he's never going to be a bench player. And I think people don't really realise that. They think, well, just start him from the bench, he'll come on for the last half an hour. He won't. He's not the type of player who'll do that. He's been a starter his entire life. So the hypothesis in Portugal, the theory before Portugal looked like they've may not qualify, was that when qualification was going well, was that him and Fernando Santos would play at this, would be at this World Cup rather, and then after it they'd leave together. Portugal's captain, Portugal's best ever scorer, and Fernando Santos, Portugal's best ever manager. The captain and the manager who brought Portugal their first silverware would leave together, and sort of the new manager would come in, and this pathway between the under-21s and the under-20s into the first team will begin. But now, I'm not too sure. I think, as you said before, things are supposed to end on a high, and now if Portugal don't even make it, who knows what happens? Who knows what happens next? But I think there's so many issues at Portugal at the moment.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's a well-rounded answer because like any issue when it concerns 11 players and management structure and a squad in its entirety, there's not just going to be one easy answer for it. When there are when there are multiple issues at hand, and simply pinning the blame on Ronaldo is not always going to be the case. But I think as you make some good points there about the fact that he's never going to be a bench player. You have to accept that he's always going to be a starter, and unless you get that clean break of Santos and Ronaldo both departing at the same time, ideally on a high, but you can't guarantee these things, then there'll always potentially be an issue there. But you're speaking about a sort of a back three or a back five there, depending on which way you want to look at it. And that kind of brings me on to sort of the next generation, essentially. I mean, this is the Scouted Football podcast. People will have tuned in to know about the best young players in the Portuguese national team setup and below. And somebody who over the past, I mean, certainly 12, 14 months on the international scene, that's really taken off. At least in terms of just being involved in the team, which for his age is something quite spectacular considering the players that he's playing around, is Nuno Mendes, who is obviously now at Paris Saint-Germain, but was at Sporting before that and kind of made his breakthrough there. He's obviously nominally a left wing back, but he's a very exciting player. I think I've described him on this podcast as spider-legged before because it's just very difficult to get past him when he's trying to get the ball off you. But I mean, with Nuno Mendes, with Rafa Leao, João Felix, the next generation essentially, who are already, I mean, apart from maybe Rafa Leao, but they're already looking as though they're going to be quite established in whoever takes in the side for whoever takes over in the next cycle, and for the next decade at the very least.
Yeah, 100%. I think the ingredients are there. I mean, this under-21 generation that's just passed, that is now Nuno Mendes' side. They're a side who they were winners at youth level. They've never quite got it done at under-21 level. They lost in the final, but under-17 European champions, under-19 European champions. Some of the players in that squad who maybe fell away a little bit, the likes of Jota, who's now at Celtic, they're now starting to get the sort of career back on track, get themselves back in showing what they can do. Florentino Luis on the weekend, I think, got his first assist for Getafe. He's playing more and more. So those sorts of players that maybe fell by the wayside are getting more minutes, which is great to see. And then obviously, as you say, the likes of Rafael Leao, who are now emerging as part of the first team setup. Whoever the next manager comes in, whoever that is in the next maybe year or two, there's an enormous pool of talent there. And then you look at the players who are a little bit older than that, who were involved in the first team setup, who've still got so much to give. The likes of Renato Sanchez, people forget that he's still only, 24 years of age. I think he was born, he's that generation of 97. So players like him, and then obviously you've got the under-21 generation, you've got the under-21 generation who are coming through now, which I'm sure we'll move on to, who are just so talented, so good to watch. Going forward defensively, they've got a coach there in Rui Jorge who he has got this clear tactical structure plan. The players can execute it perfectly. They've got good defenders, midfielders. They've got goal scorers. So that's really promising. And under-21 football, under-20 football, whatever it may be, it's always with eyes on that first team. And I think Portugal would like to get some of those players into the first team and getting minutes. But as you say, at the moment, it's a little bit doom and gloom and despondent. But we have got to look forward and think Portugal, have got this enormous pool of talent that hopefully will be utilised. Hopefully these players stay on the right track. And then obviously the generations beneath that as well, the under-19 generation, there's just so much talent. So yeah, we get to talk a little bit more positively now about the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spent the first 20 minutes saying all the doom and gloom stuff. We may as well spend the next 20 discussing the sort of the next generation and why there's reason to be hopeful. But I mean, yeah, I understand where you're coming from there. I mean, it's just a matter of fitting them into the team, essentially, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's a question of getting, and I suppose that's kind of where the where sort of the leading nature of my my Ronaldo questioning came from, or when will Fernando Santos sort of make way? Because I'm looking at the players underneath, beneath them in the pecking order in the 21s, or who've just graduated the 21s, and you're thinking, there's ample talent here. It's not as though you
Yeah.
need to hold on to these 36 plus year olds because you've got nothing else coming through. There is a bottleneck essentially. I mean, Rafa Leao's got something like 3 or 4 caps, and he's 23 now, maybe. And then you've got someone
Yeah.
like Gonzalo Guedes, who is approaching 25, I think, maybe this week, and he's on something like 22 caps, and it's like, right, okay, so that's indicative of somebody who, I mean, Rafa Leao is. I would probably put him as a player who's got a higher ceiling than Gedge, but the time that Gonzalo Guedes was coming through kind of made it as though he was very much the up and coming Portuguese young player,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
now Leao is part of a crop of them, and you've got your pick. So, and obviously with Fernando Santos, he's obviously trusted Gedge in these games, and naturally you're going to get more opportunities than somebody who hasn't been tried and tested. So, yeah, I mean, we'll get onto the 21s because you touched on them there. I mean, I wrote down here, fitting the under 21s of the last cycle into the senior setup. You've got the likes of, your Diogo Dallos, who, of course, Manchester United. You mentioned Florentino Luis, Jota, those types of players who are playing at a good level. They're playing at top clubs in European football. It's just the question of how do you transition? When do you transition, and who do you transition out effectively? Because as you've mentioned, there's your Diaz's, your Bernardo Silva's, your Bruno Fernandes. There's a lot of players in there who are just not going to make way. So who makes way?
I think, to be honest, rather than looking at personnel, we have to look positionally. So
Okay.
we were speaking a little bit off air. What position the Portugal suffered in or have suffered in recently? Well, it's central defence, isn't it? It's at the back. Now, if you're looking at the partnerships now for Portugal, obviously if you take Ruben Diaz out, because there's going to be games when he's not going to be available, you can't rely on him to be this starting central defender all the time. Now, the other two options, you've got Pep, who's 38, Jose Font, who, okay, be fair to him, he's still playing for Lille. He won the League on last season. He's found himself a good home there, but it's not at the intensity and level. When he comes into the national team, he just looks off the pace a little bit, and then add into the fact his age. You know what I mean? So that's difficult. So you're thinking, right, who's going to be the next replacement? Well, for years it was Diogo Queiroz and Diogo Leite, who were both part of that FC Porto setup. They were both in the under-19 UEFA Youth League winning team. So the first ever Portuguese team to win the UEFA Youth League, which I'm sure you'll know, is just like a mini Champions League for under-19 teams. Now, Diogo Queiroz was the captain of that side, but Diogo Leite was the one that people thought maybe had the more of the talent. But it seemed like there was room for both of them in that national team, in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, that just shows you how quick football moves, because now those people that were calling them to be called up to the senior side and to be starting have went very quiet, because, well, look, Diogo Queiroz's case, he was sold to Famalicão from Porto at a time when Porto was short on defenders, really, and they still are. He then was loaned to Valladolid, where he is now in La Liga on a loan, I think, with an option to buy. He played the first 2 or 3 games, got a straight red card. He hasn't been seen since, I think, maybe 7 or 8 consecutive games on the bench. So he's not even playing football at the moment, because he's not dropping down and playing youth football or getting minutes elsewhere. He's just on the first team bench. He's not really learning anything from that. Now, if they don't exercise the transfer, which I'm sure they won't, is he then comes back at the end of the season, and at that point you think, okay, he's 23 going on 24. Or, it felt like 5 minutes ago he was 20, 21. And now you think, well, is he ever going to have is he ever going to make it? Another one was Ferro, who was playing for Benfica, the central defender, came into the team, was playing with Ruben Dias, people were speaking, this was like the Diogo Leite, the Diogo Queiroz of Benfica, another central defender coming through. Had a little bit of an injury and was playing through it, lost his way a little bit, and again, doesn't really play anymore. Diogo Leite was sent to Braga at a time, as I say, again, when Porto they have Ivan Marcano, who they brought back, who is aging. They've got Chancellor Mbemba, who's, I think, going into the last year of his contract, and his form has dipped recently. And then you've got Pep, who's 38, and you can't expect to play every game in the Taça da Liga, Taça de Portugal, Champions League, and Primeira Liga, and then go away on international duty and be fit as well. So they signed, they re-signed Fabio Cardoso, who came through Porto's youth setup, if I'm correct in thinking that. But Diogo Leite, you're thinking, how did it end up like this? He was in the side last week that conceded 6 to Benfica. It was a little bit all over the place, not to put it just on him, but football just does move so quickly, and now you're looking at someone like Gonçalo Inácio, who I think at this moment in time could move up to the senior side.
He's had a recent call-up, hasn't he? Or am I making that up?
He may have. I'll have to check into that.
I don't think he's made his debut, but I think he might have had a recent call-up.
I think he got added. He got added to the team.
That's what I mean.
So
yeah,
I think someone dropped out. Yeah.
A late replacement sort of thing.
Yeah. But I think he is someone that, someone that could definitely come in and do a job, as you say, even if it's to be around the squad at the moment and just to be in that environment and be learning
the fifth and then sort of thing.
Yeah, but when you're looking at the ages of these players, you are going to have to breed someone in soon. Someone is going to have to come in, because all of a sudden these players will hit 40 and they're no longer playing for Portugal. And then you've got loads of central defenders who you haven't even called up to be with the squad, who've then automatically got to then jump into senior international football. It's difficult, and I think someone like Gonçalo Inácio, he's someone that we're all pinning our hopes on, to be honest, in being that partner alongside Ruben Dias, because we've put our faith in other players, and football, as things happen, things change, players move, form dips, players lose consistency, and also just players struggle to adapt going from youth football to senior football. I mean, the jump is incredible, going from, say, under 23s or B team football. So I think the central defence issue is definitely something that needs a close eye on it. And then obviously, as you say, this sort of bottleneck of attacking players. You got someone like Pedro Gonçalves, known as Put, who plays for Sporting. Again, what a super talented player, young player. João Felix is still very young. He has the potential to be whatever he wants to be.
Yeah.
But these injuries just seem to be
getting him. Don't they?
Yeah, they're getting him down. But yeah, there's so much talent.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of so much talent, I mean, I was sort of closely following the under-21 team, the current cycle, which is obviously renewed from September after that Euros in the summer, the under-21 Euros in the summer, that is, because obviously now it's only players who were born on or after the 1st of January 2000 who are now eligible to compete in the next cycle of under-21 fixtures. That's leading up to the under-21 Euros in 2023 in Romania and Georgia. So, I mean, we've been talking about the serious talent pool that was in the previous cycle. And I'd say probably ordinarily you wouldn't, for a country of Portugal's population size, you wouldn't get sort of a generational senior team like we have seen over the past decade or 15 years, for example. Followed by an under-21 group who have gone on to under-17, under-19 success, and then two under-21 Euro finals, wasn't it? 2015 and 2020. And then follow that up again with another under-21 crop, which is just as talented, if not more so, or at least the potential is very exciting, especially when you consider the Gonzalo Inacios among them. So I think that's in itself that's something which absolutely has to be celebrated, because you don't get that with you don't get that with with countries who have twice the number of people in the country. Germany at the moment are a prime example. Their talent pathway in the early 2010s, sort of with when you had your Thomas Müllers and your Mesut Özils coming through, your Mario Götzes, that was famed for how effective it had been, because of ultimately they won the 2014 World Cup. But currently, I think their last game in the under-21 Euro cycle, I think they lost 4-0 to Poland. And while there are some decent players in that squad, then none of them are household names like you'd potentially say that some of these Portuguese under-21 players are. And I'm talking about the likes of Vitinha, Fabio Vieira, both playing regularly for Porto, Nuno Tavares, who's at Arsenal starting some weeks, Gonzalo Ramos, who is who's at Benfica, Gonzalo Inacio at Sporting, as you just mentioned, and they are just 5 names that I've just reeled off from this under-21 squad. And Gonzalo Ramos, I think he's got 8 goals. He's under-21 Euro qualifying's top scorer at the moment. The team as a whole, and the thing with under-21 qualifying is that the poorer teams are even poorer than sort of the senior national teams, because obviously you're restricted by the age group. But 20 goals for Portugal, none conceded, 5 wins from 5. It's been an unqualified success, really, and they're very much on the way to qualifying for that tournament in 2023, aren't they?
Yeah, it has. It's been fantastic, and to be honest, it's this sort of breath of fresh air, because obviously we've watched the last crop for so long. Like, I was watching that crop when they were under 17 and sort of following them. They were this new golden generation, and whatever happens in the next couple of years with that crop in terms of going into the first team, we'll see. But then, as you say, it's not a surprise, but it's like, okay, now we've got this other under-21 generation, which is just as good, if not better. It is literally, it's astounding, the levels of talent, and what we're seeing now is those players who played in the last generation, the younger players, so the likes of Vitinha and Fabio Vieira, who both, I think, started in the under-21 final of the last generation. They were the young pups in the team. They were, that wasn't their generation. They were just sort of helping out because they were good enough to do so. Now this is their generation, and now they're the sort of elder statesmen at 21 years of age, which sounds funny to say. But they're starting every week. We're starting every game, for the under-21s. So talented. Fabio Vieira is incredible, and so is Vitinha. Obviously, Vitinha is maybe a bit more familiar to the English audience with his low move to Wolves. Didn't get as many minutes as maybe he thought he would, or at least Porto thought he would,
or deserved, in my opinion. He was fantastic at the under-21 Euros this summer.
Yeah.
He was. If I hadn't, I've definitely got this somewhere. He was in my team of the tournament. Don't know whether I ultimately gave him player of the tournament, but he was very much up there. And as you say, he was helping out because he was one of the young pups, wasn't he?
Yeah, and as I say, being able to drop in and still stand out. And Fabio Vieira was the same. I think Fabio Vieira may have been given player of the tournament at that Euros. I'll have to check if I'm right on that. But again, just so much talent. And then we spoke before about him, Gonzalo Inacio, the other central defender there, Eduardo Quaresma, is someone that burst onto the scene for Sporting and is good with his feet, and likes to play with the ball. Defensively looks good, and then he sort of had this spell where he was in and out of the team. There was rumours of stuff off the field, what's going on, and then he's then loaned out to Tondela. We'll see sort of how he gets on this season, but hopefully he can return to that form that he first shown. João Mario, the right back who plays for Porto, he played in the last game. I think he started in the game against Cyprus. Again, every time he plays for Porto first team, he's brilliant. And I don't think anybody really expected him to in that position as well as a right back, because he's naturally he's a more forward player, playing out wide, playing further up the pitch, and then he's sort of found himself playing right back, and he's excelling at it at the moment, to be honest. And look, you don't get into a Sergio Conceição's side if you don't do your defensive responsibilities, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and if you're caught out of position. And the fact that he's playing, most weeks when he can at 21 years of age, for a side like Porto, for a manager like Conceição who demands so much, is fantastic. And then, as you say, you touched on Gonzalo Ramos there. He's just on fire at the moment. Absolutely, he's all types of goals as well, bicycle kicks, headers, left, right. He's just playing like a man with, such brimming with confidence. And then alongside him, you've got someone who's maybe the opposite end of the confidence spectrum at the minute in Fabio Silva, who's finding it tough at the moment, to be honest. And I'm happy that he's still in the under-21 setup, as in, like, he's still, despite not playing for Wolves, he's still being called up. Now, some people say he should be called up on, he should be playing week in, week out. It should be, merit. But it gives him a chance to go. It gives him a chance to play football and try and get his confidence back. At the moment, it's not looking the best for him. I do think he needs a low move, because I do think there's talent there.
Just needs football, doesn't he? Just needs game time.
That's it.
And he's not going to get that in the system at Wolves. He's not going to get that with the trust. He's. I think we said on this podcast when he initially signed. There's a lot of faith in that move, especially for the fee. There's a lot of expectation, and while he's a very talented player, he's probably just not there yet. And the fact that he's still able to qualify for an under-21 tournament at this stage, in this cycle, shows that he was extremely young when that move was made. So I do think he just needs a bit of football. Gonzalo Ramos, am I right in thinking that he was literally scoring some serious amount of goals off the bench for Benfica? Was it not the summer just passed, but the one before?
Yeah, he's prolific every time. He was basically dividing his time between the first team and playing in the Segunda Liga for Benfica B. So I think that's really helped with his development, because when you picture, say, a player that plays in England, if they're playing under 23 football in a league that's not very, competitive, as some youth football isn't, but then you look at someone like Gonzalo Ramos, that when he plays for Benfica B, he's playing in just the second division. He's playing in the equivalent of the English Championship. So he's playing against men. He's playing against, actual professionals who've got something to lose, who can be promoted, who can be relegated. So in Portugal, they have an under-23 league, Liga Relevação. Playing in somewhere like the Segunda Liga is so much, more beneficial. So he's scoring goals for fun there. Then he was being called up to the first team, coming off the bench, banging in goals there. Sometimes, I think in the game against Nacional, I think it was, he came off the bench and scored twice. And he came off the bench after about 70 minutes, scored after 10 minutes, and then scored again. And that was to win the game. At that point, the game was 1-1. So it's those type of games you're thinking you've got a player there, someone who only needs 10, 15 minutes on the pitch to introduce himself. So, we'll see how his development goes. But fingers crossed he can keep sort of banging them in, because another sort of natural goal scorer is exactly what Portugal need, especially going forward in the next couple of years to the senior team. That's someone who really knows where the back of the net is, and that's exactly what he is. He scored 4 in the game against Liechtenstein, that absolute demolition. The most recent 2 games, he's got 4 in 2. He got a hat-trick against Cyprus and got 1 in the reverse fixture as well. So he is just really high on confidence.
Now, Rui Jorge, who's obviously the under-21 boss, and you can correct me on my pronunciation there. I've been frantically Googling how to pronounce it in the past sort of few minutes or so since I thought of this question, but he's heading into his 12th year in the role as under-21 boss. So he's been twice under-21 Euro runner-up. He's effectively stewarded quite a few players from his team into the senior setup. Is it outside the realms of possibility to expect him to take over the reins from Fernando Santos whenever the time comes?
No, I don't think it's outside of the realms. To be honest, he was actually being touted in some of the media as if Fernando Santos was to leave now, as in before the playoffs, that Rui Jorge would be someone that would come in and maybe take them through the playoffs. Maybe not get the job permanently, but if he, was to successfully go through the playoffs, maybe be given a chance at the World Cup to sort of put his stamp on things. Ultimately, the Federation have decided to go in another direction. Fernando Santos apparently to sack him would cost, I think it was €6 million or something. It might have been more. So they're not going to do that. They're going to wait for him to go sort of on his own terms. He's said he'll step down if they don't make it to the World Cup. Then at that point, does someone like Jorge get the job? I'm not sure. I do think, although giving a manager the responsibility of taking them through a playoff would be a risk, there was a part of me that was excited to see just how he would look as the first team manager, because I say he does get the best out of these young players, and of course youth football is a different level, and he's someone who knows youth football like the back of his hand, and he's not too well versed in the senior game, but his team have principles. They have, he has this tactical vision. The players are able to follow it. He's able to implement it. He's been around the Portugal setup for years. I mean, let's not forget he was the manager of the Portugal Olympic team back in 2016, I think it was. Yeah, 2016. That was the team that had like Bruno Fernandes in, Sergio Oliveira, Gonzalo Paciencia. That team, like, so he's been around the block and he knows the federation in and out. But whether they go with him, with the senior side, I keep calling them the first team when really should be saying senior side. Would it be a little bit of a risk? I'm not too sure, but look, football, that's what they get paid to do. The federation, they get paid to make these kind of decisions, and who knows what will work. Fernando Santos initially came in to steady the ship after an awful result. Portugal lost against Albania, and then he came in to sort of guide qualification. And now it seems like things have came back around in circles. It's now Portugal are struggling with qualification. Are they going to bring in someone they think is another safe name, a more experienced option? I just don't know. I just don't know. But he's definitely a talented coach, is Rui Jorge, and you can see just from the players that he's brought through and the success that he's managed to get.
Great stuff. Well, I'd like to see that happen from a personal perspective. We always like to see youth coaches be promoted to the top job. I've long been sort of pining after Luis de la Fuente in the under-21 job at Spain to be given a senior job somewhere, because he's done a stellar job there. But maybe Rui Jorge can get that top job. Who knows? This has been the Scouted Football Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to Aaron for his insight and his expertise on Portuguese football, and most of all, just your passion for it. Where can people follow your work? Where can people find you?
So you can follow us on Twitter at Próxima Jornada 1, and then the Portuguese Football Show is a podcast. It's currently on a little bit of a break. We're changing over streaming providers sort of thing, so a bit of technical stuff going on there. But that's, at the moment, you can catch all the old episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all there. We actually did a really cool Euros show when the Euros was on, where we revisited every European Championship that Portugal have been at, starting with the first and obviously ending with Euro 2016. So tune into that to listen to that, and then that's pretty much it. Well, on our website, Próxima-Jornada .com. Interviews on there, scout reports, all that good stuff. You'll find something.
All the good stuff, yeah. I'll make sure to pop the relevant links and the ats into the description for this episode if you want to check out more from Aaron and the team. But yeah, this has been the Scouted Podcast discussing Portugal and sort of the next generation, what's to come next, with myself, Joe Donahue. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Stay safe, take care, bye for now. For player profiles, in-depth features, and exclusive interviews, visit sfhandbook.com to learn more about the best young football players in the world.